story of Coldplay is that of a group of middle-class, educated young men falling in love with their art. At such a young age, they have already produced 2 epoch-defining albums that will stand the test of time.
They're really catchy songs. They've got great hooks and great choruses, and that's a great song on the radio. It's a kind of like, oh, it's Coldplay, I'll turn it up in the car, and that's a winning song.
They wanted to be big. I mean, there are a lot of people that come in here that sort of like that want to be big. They seem to have that determination about them to sort of like give it their very, very best shot.
So many times you read about bands cracking America in the music press, and actually when you read it, they've gone into number 85. Well, that's not cracking America. Top 5 Billboard is cracking America, and stadium shows is cracking America. Coldplay have already done that.
Coldplay's band members all grew up in comfortable middle-class families from far-flung corners of the UK. And all 4, Guy Berryman, Johnny Buckland, Chris Martin and William Champion, had happy, untroubled childhoods. Lead singer, lyrics man, guitarist and pianist Chris Martin was raised close to Tiverton in Devon. As a product of Sherborne School, Yeovil's hotbed of public school privilege, Martin was the archetypal polite, artsy, middle-class student. Thomas Piszczyd-Szymerski was a close school friend of Chris, and together they formed a variety of school bands.
I first met Chris when I was 13 years old at my first day at Sherborne. We were in the same house, same year together, and basically got to know him pretty quickly, as you do when you're living together. We had a house concert, and everyone that could play, and pretty much everyone who could play an instrument in our year got together. And Chris had written a tune on the piano, and me and a friend, Simon Clark, we kind of liked the sound of it, and we thought we could play that as a band. So we did, and we played it in the house concert. It was a tune that he wrote. He could come up with words and put them to a melody really easily. His music tastes were quite, I think Elton John at the time was his biggest influence, so that's why he still does a lot of singing and playing the piano. He would quite often change the song, change the lyrics and change the format. I remember one band practice which we were actually recording. I think I've got a recording of it somewhere, where at the end he changed the last verse completely, and you can just hear everyone going, "Oh, for fuck's sake, Martin, what did you change that for?"
Also, during Chris's time at Sherborne, he had befriended schoolmate Rupert Bonham.
Chris was always a warm-spirited guy that, you know, people, I think, yeah, you could trust him, and he's the sort of guy anyone could go to. And, you know, he did definitely have time for people, and he had a good sense of humour as well. He was always up for a laugh and pranking around.
He was very outgoing, and definitely the entertainer of the year. I remember when he first arrived, he was quite proud of his Frank Spencer impression, and would do that quite a lot.
Did a lot with the chapel, and was quite religious, so I think he was an interesting character, really quite different from the average sort of school guy. And he was, I mean, I just seem to, the thing that stands out was his popularity, I think, with both girls and guys. Everyone knew that he was going to go far from quite a young age, and winning stuff like the music competition and various awards in London, and he was often sort of pulled out to play in front of the school. I remember everyone, just all my mates, I mean, obviously we were quite young and impressionable, and everyone was all struck by this amazing, you know, I don't think people had heard anything like it. It was just unique, and his sound. It was quite emotional as well, so, you know, you definitely got, you know, it's a really moving song, and I suppose that inspired a lot of what was to come.
At the time, I suppose I was grateful that someone was writing something of relative quality. We would make it a bit heavier than he originally had written it.
Chris entered a few competitions. One was sponsored by Phil Collins in London, and he came away with the top prize for that. His early style was quite different from how he sings now. You know, it's definitely evolved into his Coldplay.
His understanding of music, I don't know if he had much tuition, but he seemed to pick up things very quickly and naturally. When we started at Sherborne, he didn't play the guitar at all, and now I see with the Coldplay that he does play the guitar sometimes, and he looks like he'd been playing it for a long time.
Johnny Buckland, the group's lead guitarist, was brought up in the small North Wales town of Mold. He was raised by a science teacher and a music teacher mum, who instilled in her son a musical sensibility from an early age. Johnny attended Allen School in Mold, where he was close friends with Ken Skates.
When we started at Mold Allen High School, Johnny's brother had already been there for 3 years, and he had taken up music, he had taken up the guitar, and he was excellent. He used to play the guitar on the school bus, more coming home than in the morning. But so Johnny went there with his brother already established there, keen on music and very, very good. He, as a character, he was quite quiet, very laid back, dry wit. But again, he couldn't offend anyone, and so he was pretty popular right through high school. Johnny, like many other people, followed basically what his brother and what the older lads on the estates were doing, and he took up music. And then that followed on into classes, and he took up music at A-level, where he was really good at composing music, and so there was a gradual feed into playing the guitar, but I think it could have been predicted from the way that his brother took it up and the other lads did. There is also within his family quite a rich and talented creative vein in entertainment and music, so it was just waiting there to be tapped into, I think.
I feel like a disappointment.
Bassist Guy Berryman was born in Fife, Scotland, but moved to Kent at the age of 12. Whilst at college, Guy spent a large part of his time working at Canterbury's Simple Simon pub, where punters there remember him fondly.
Guy was working here in 1997. That's in this lovely pub in Canterbury, Simple Simon's. Lovely chap. He was working behind the bar. What I do remember about Guy is whenever he was working, there was a great profusion of young ladies here. And, he had an artistic bent and really interested in the prettier ones. In fact, I can remember a couple of lasses that were quite happy to throw themselves at him, but he was very laid back about the whole thing and would be very, very quiet and reticent, and made him even more interesting. But the other things about Guy were he was always showing an interest in the music we had here. He used to play jazz, blues, folk, which we still do, and he was always here on the jazz and blues nights, talking to local musicians that worked here, picking up pointers and going off with them and talking about the types and styles of music.
But the interesting decision he had to make was he going to go on with his architecture course, which is obviously 5-6 years, even longer, or was he going to change and stick with the band? And I said, well, if you do go with the band, realise you might be up against managers who want to take your money off you quite quickly and efficiently. They're better at it than you are. Or you're going to carry on with architecture. And he said, well, I've got the opportunity, I've got to take it. So my suggestion was, well, you could take a year out from architecture and take up the band, see how it goes from there. You know, he liked chatting about what he was doing up in London whilst he was doing his course. And he thought they were a really good band, you know. He knew they were good. I think he's very self-directed. He's very self-assured, very confident. And he knew he was doing the right thing. That's what I thought at the time.
This is where we're going.
I think he knew inside himself it was the thing he wanted to do, and he had that chance, he had to take it at the time. So his drive and determination ensured that he made a success of it.
You don't expect somebody who's been working in your bar to go on and be a megastar, so that was surprising in itself. But the fact that he was always very interested and would follow through on anything he did, that didn't surprise me.
When Guy made it, I think everyone here was really absolutely pleased for him. They were really glad to have known him here, his friends at school similarly, and really pleased he'd made it, because he's the sort of guy you want to support and help, and like to see him get on. It was really tremendous, and I think everyone here really envies what he's doing, but they're not jealous of it. They're really pleased for him that he's done so well, because he hasn't really changed. I think that's the key thing that people will say about him. He hasn't changed as a human being. And he comes back occasionally when he's in Canterbury.
Drummer Will Champion grew up in Southampton and started playing drums from an early age. In fact, he learnt to play a wide range of musical instruments, including the tin whistle as an adolescent. A fan of Irish folk music, Champion played guitar in a band called Fat Hamster before joining the ranks of Coldplay.
I think Will's got this physique where he looks quite hard, so he often ends up in scrapes for no reason whatsoever. Well, when I saw them in Stockholm last year, somehow people started to pick an argument with him. There's nothing to do with him whatsoever, because he's a drummer and he's got #1 haircut. People think he's a hard boy, but he's lovely, really.
The members of Coldplay had grown up from their respective corners of England and before long were to meet and turn their early years of music experimentation into one of the world's top bands. Converging on the capital's University College of London in 1996, the four guys hit it off instantly and became best friends. And before long, all four friends shared a burning, insatiable passion for music and a quiet belief in themselves, determined to be as good as they could possibly be.
The early days was the classic student band. They all went to university together. They were sort of friend of a friend, and he had a friend over here and he had a friend over there. Some of them played hockey, and Will actually was a guitarist who had an old vintage Telecaster, and they had an audition for a drummer who didn't turn up, and said, Will said, "I'll just sit in," and he became the drummer, gave his Telecaster to Johnny. So it's all the classic sort of fumbling around for an identity. And the problem they had was they were a classic student formation, and it sounded like a classic student band at first. And I think the people initially didn't take them seriously because they just looked like a bunch of sixth formers, albeit at university. It felt like a bunch of sixth formers with no lectures to go to. So let's write some emotional ballads and sort of feel sorry for ourselves.
From the beginning, there were no ego clashes, no agenda, just purely a devotion to music making. And Guy Berryman was so convinced by the band's chemistry and potential that he dropped out of university. Soon, the band began performing around London venues and decided that the time was right to record their first EP. Coldplay cut their Safety EP in 1998, and Martin's school friend and later band manager Phil Harvey helped finance the 3 songs, recorded at Sync City Studios in London. Coldplay produced the EP in tandem with Nicky Rossetti and Ron Niblett.
They actually came down to Starfish first of all, and then after a little while they came in and said, "Oh, we've changed the name. What to? It's Coldplay." And that was that. That's how we first got to know them, as Coldplay. They recorded 8 songs, I believe, for the Safety EP and chose those 3. And then came in at a second time to record a track called Brothers and Sisters, which is really nice. And that was shortly before they released Yellow. I always thought they were distinctive, there's Chris Martin's voice, obviously, which is makes your ears prick up and that sort of stuff. And John was always, he's one of those blokes that was never quite happy with the, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but with guitarists, they're never happy with what they do, and he wasn't any different from that, but he was he had a very definite idea of what he wanted his guitar to sound like. Will and Guy were just, it's just one of those things you get from time to time, where a bass player and a drummer just play well together. They just seem to sort of like know what each other's doing, kind of thing, which is, it's quite rare, it is quite rare, that. And as a unit, as a working unit, I mean, they all seem to have a definite idea and very focused on what they were doing.
I had lunch about 12 months ago with somebody, a very key figure in EMI Records, and when they were approached by Coldplay in the first instance, the band sat them down over a beer and said, "We want to be the next Radiohead." That was their missive, that was their direction, and they didn't mean just the sound, they meant the whole concept and the whole global success. And I think they've already done that. I mean, bear in mind, in '97 they were just a bunch of students, really, and now they're like one of the biggest rock bands on the planet. 6 years later, that's a pretty quick turnaround.
As 1999 kicked in, record label Fierce Panda were overwhelmed by the Safety EP and signed Coldplay for a one-off deal. And the quality of these songs soon caught the attention of NME and Radio 1's Steve Lamacq, who offered much praise. By the summer of 1999, the guys became the subject of a bidding war and eventually signed a recording deal with Dan Keeling at Parlophone Records and a publishing deal with BMG. On July the 10th, 2000, Coldplay issued their intensely awaited debut album, Parachutes.
First time I heard Parachutes was a week before the actual release. I've got a promotional copy, and I was kind of disappointed on first hearing. I thought it was very obtuse, a little lightweight. Really, if I'm being harsh, it sounded like a sixth form band sitting around in their little room at uni on campus, writing fairly self-indulgent ballads. The lyrics were largely nonsensical on first hearing. There was a degree of repetition in the sound of the guitar. It was kind of nice, but it didn't really do it for me. But it was such a grower. Within like 3 or 4 weeks, I started to separate all the songs off. So Yellow obviously was the highlight, but there was Shiver, the single Shiver. And, stuff was really starting to get its own personality. And the thing about that album that was good for Coldplay was it was kind of their personality. It was like meeting them at a bar. That album told you what they were about. And although they've gone on to surpass that album easily, that first Lung Player was a great introduction in retrospect.
Parachutes is a modern masterpiece, a work of popular art. The tunes are melodic, understated and beautifully delivered. Drive Time DJ from London's Heart 106.2, Rachel Hopper, is a huge fan and follower of the band.
I think when I first heard it, there were standout tracks. Shiver was the big standout track for me, even though that wasn't a single. I think when I first heard Yellow or Trouble, I wasn't quite sure. And I think listening through, I thought, this is different. I like this because I've always liked indie, I've liked guitar. I didn't think there was any way it was going to be as huge as it was at the time. And obviously, when you're sitting down with loads of new material in front of you, you kind of flick through and think. But I did go back to it, and it was one of the CDs that I took home and thought, actually, I want to listen to this at home, kind of like relaxed, glass of wine, get some mates round, and actually it made it into my CD changer, and it never came out of there, to be honest. And now, great album, but it's a grower. I think when you first heard it, it was it's different, it's got some great stuff on it, but I'm not necessarily sure. And now it's a mainstay of every living room CD cabinet in the UK, isn't it? It's a great album.
I thought Parachute was one of the best debut albums I'd heard probably ever, going back to Boy by U2 in the very late 70s. I think, you know, in the 60s and 70s, bands didn't make a great album off the bat. They took them 2 or 3 albums to get into their stride, and suddenly, you know, in the 80s, more debut albums were like the best albums bands ever done. And Coldplay, I think, that album, suddenly Parachute, I went, oh my God, this is great. This is the best album this year.
Released on the 26th of June, Yellow became the band's biggest hit so far, going straight into the charts at number 4.
Yellow is one of the greatest ballads of recent modern period. I think most people would agree with that. The impact it had on Coldplay's career is just absolutely colossal. They wouldn't be where they are today without that song. He used a very interesting trick, which he does a lot. He did it on his future single Trouble, where he repeats one word as a little technique. And that works well for them. That's an example of how I thought the first album was repetitious, using the same little tricks, but it worked on Trouble and it worked on Yellow. It was beautifully produced, really simple, as most of that first album is. The guitars got a beautiful tone to them, but no one could have imagined it would have the effect it did. I mean, the radio pluggers and the radio play that got was just colossal. It was like the old cliche of, like, you walk past a building site and somebody's whistling it, you go into a dentist, it's on in the dentist. And nobody could have foreseen that, really. But it is, at the bottom of all of that hype, it's just a massively classic, incredible, beautifully crafted song.
Lyrically, Martin's songs in Parachutes deal with the bittersweet balance between infatuation and the isolation of the romantic loser. Every song oozes with love, pain, happiness and hope in the world.
On Parachutes, I think the lyrics are fantastic. You can take them in so many different ways. I mean, things like Yellow and Trouble, I think the big singles from that album, are very much, I get the impression it's very much kind of the one that got away. I think, obviously, Chris is writing from his own experience. We know on the second album he writes about the scientist, a woman that he actually, you know, did actually have a crush on, and it didn't go anywhere. But I think on the first album, he obviously kind of lusts after these women from afar, and he almost, it's quite sad when you actually look at the lyrics, because he obviously doesn't think an awful lot about himself in the way that he could actually end up going out with these women. And if he does, the idea on Trouble that he would do something terrible and it would all go terribly wrong, which is sad, but at the same time it appeals, because I think we all kind of think that about relationships some way. He seems quite down when you look at the lyrics. He is a very shy, very nice guy, and obviously he thinks about things very deeply, and that certainly comes across on the first album.
He's quite clever with his lyrics because they're actually largely nonsensical, a lot of the time, apart from the more obvious ones. But he does it in a way that isn't obtuse like R.E.M., where you listen to an R.E.M. song, you haven't got a clue what he's talking about. You memorise the lyrics nonetheless and you sing along, haven't got a clue what he's talking about. But Coldplay, you start to evolve what you think the song's about, and therefore that can appeal to all sorts of people who read into their current situation what those words are about. And when you look at in detail at his lyrics, they're quite simple. There's no sort of 3rd or 4th dimension concepts and subplots and stuff. It's all pretty straightforward stuff, but done with a nice degree of openness and ambiguity that I think allows you to sort of buy into it. But essentially they don't mean a lot of the songs.
Parachutes is by any standard one of the all-time great debut albums, which went on to shift an amazing 5 million copies around the world. Their status as the biggest new band in Britain was confirmed at the Brit Awards, where they took home 2 trophies for Best British Band and Best Album. Meanwhile, sales returns from the US confirmed that Coldplay had shifted an incredible 1.75 million copies of the album, an astonishing figure in a market traditionally elusive for homegrown British bands. In April 2000, Coldplay appeared at the Big Noise demo rally in London. And later, in 2001, Martin travelled to Haiti to promote the good works of Fair Trade, an organisation committed to improving the trading conditions of third world producers. The experience not only humbled Martin, but made him realise just how privileged he was.
I grew up like everyone else watching comic relief things, and it's so far away, and and it looks so glamorous on TV. Poverty looks so glamorous on TV. And then I got to Haiti and it hit me, bloody hell. You know, this country really is being ruined by whatever reasons. In this case, a lot of bad trade and, you know, a lot of corruption and a lot of, you know, they're just crippled.
The thing on the hand, I mean, it was on Top of the Pops, I think, was most people's first experience of it. I'm sort of looking at the telly like this to see what's actually written on there. But like the next day, there was like a record number of hits on the website. And he was criticised heavily in the press and in the record industry, funny enough. And I think people felt it was too soon for him to be this kind of pioneering charity campaign. Like, who does he think he is? He's only done 2 albums and he's got this stuff and we've got to go on this website. You know, I like my coffee cheap and I like my chocolate cheap. Well, you know, I'm not into this. But I think that was a bit churlish, really. I mean, are we saying that you've got to have 5 Grammys in the bag and 6 albums before you can become concerned about other issues? I can see what they're getting at. He was like he was the new kid on the block telling us what to do. I think that was what people felt. But, you know, I think that's a bit harsh, really.
Excuse me if I deodorize. And I remember, I think I walked into the office and there was something on the desk from Oxfam. And because I'm a knobhead, I said, "Oh, what's that? What's that on the desk?" And it said, "Oh, you know, can Chris come on this trip?" And I think I must have been going through a real ego time. So I thought, yeah, I can save the world.
Pop stars get a lot of flack for getting into politics and some areas of charity work. But I think with him it's quite understated. He's obviously a man of principle and he just thinks, well, look, you know, I'm in a really successful band, I'm going out with Hollywood A-list celebrity, I'm getting photographed at every point, I might as well manipulate the media back and just make sure that people know about that I support this charity. And, you know, it's there. He doesn't go on about it at great length, but it's there. And if you check out the fan site, there is a big section there and you can find out more about the charity and what they do. So I think he's done that with quite a lot of integrity. He's not doing a Bono where he's standing up and doing a massive tirade against politics. So fair play to him. You know, he might as well exploit the media and the interest that he's getting.
Basically had a life-changing effect on him. He was sitting on the back of a truck with other members from Oxfam, driving along dirt tracks, seeing people in absolute destitute poverty. Deprivation way beyond anything that you could find within an inner city. And it just shocked him. And this coincided with him being told how beautiful he is, and how talented he is, and how rich he will be when the royalty statements come in. And I just think the whole sort of contradiction of what he was seeing and experiencing with what he was personally being told and was personally earning money and all these sort of things was just shocked him into just getting involved on that level. And he's done many trips now, as well as the obvious concerts. You never see him without a website mentioned somewhere. If it's not on his hand, it's somewhere else on a T-shirt or something. And you know what? That's probably the highest profile charity within the under 30 years age group at the moment, so it's worked.
We take it so for granted that we've got these lovely pavements and, you know, look at those windows and everything, but you go somewhere where no one keeps up anything. No, there's no upkeep of roads, there's no health, there's no nothing. And you think, shit, you know. And then when someone says, well, actually this place is like this because of your country and your neighbouring countries, you think, well, right, well, I'm going to try and get involved in doing something useful.
Each individual has his own distinctive personality and take on things. But the jewel in the group is undoubtedly Chris Martin. Ambitious, softly spoken, relentlessly creative, and seized by a desire to make Coldplay as great as they can be. He is the pivotal member of the quartet.
Chris Martin is like, for me, he's a fascinating mix of, sometimes he does things that you think, well, why has he done that then? That's a bit strange. And other times you think that's just great, you know, it's really good to see rock people doing this sort of thing. Because there's a lot of bland rock stars out there. You know, people criticise the pop genre, but there's a lot of boring, middle-class kids wearing leather jackets that they think the Velvet Underground would have wore, you know, and it's like, come on, you know, need more than that. So I think Chris Martin's a very welcome antidote to all of that. He has been criticised for being bombastic and sort of pompous with this whole charity thing, but, you know, that's a great thing to do. I don't think he should be criticised. If you don't like it, don't contribute to the charity. But you can't deny that he's better than sort of snorting cocaine. At least he's out there doing something a bit more, you know, useful. So I think his personality is very interesting. He's kind of, at the moment, he's caught, I think, because he knows he's a global rock star and he knows he doesn't like what comes with that, but it's a fact. So he's got to face up to that. And there was a lot of trouble before the second album, a lot of rumour within the industry that he was kind of struggling to understand that he would leave his house and there might be a guy taking a photograph of him.
Chris has got an amazing sense of humor, very self-deprecating, always, you know, the first one to take the mickey out of himself, and suddenly doesn't believe any praise he gets from anybody. As much as he puts a lot of, you know, work into the band and does want them to be the best band in the world, he's always the first one to criticize, you know, himself, you know, for letting everybody else down when he's actually, you know, the one pulling the whole thing.
As a frontman, to look like he looks, to have the kind of presence that he's got, he's a great start. But then to walk up on stage and sing in that way, with the control that he's got in the falsetto, as well as the tone, and yet somehow he makes it sound like he's talking. It's almost like a conversation, even though the melody's all over the shop. And that's a real skill. But he couldn't do that if the three people behind him were just all vying for attention. And that is Coldplay's greatest strength, is that the three people who most of the public don't really know much about are the most controlled. And I think that's a real plus.
I think all three of them have got in common, the other three in the band, apart from Chris, have got in common that they don't spoil the songs that are written. Yeah. They all add something, but they don't like overcrowd any of their songs. They all know when not to play and when to play, and they all add melody and hooks. Yeah. Guys' bass lines are always adding something to the songs, but they're never like kind of
over there.
Yeah.
And it's kind of it must be weird for them because it's like Coldplay is largely about Chris.
Though singer and lyricist Chris Martin invariably commands most of the media attention within the band, Coldplay are born of a four-way dynamic that is utterly interdependent.
I think the personalities of the band are so closely tied with their musical roles that, you know, that mirrors what I was saying earlier about the other three knowing when to sit back. If you notice on the awards ceremonies, they all walk up at the same time. Then somehow they just drift back and Chris Martin comes in and does the acceptance speech. And I think that sums up what Coldplay are about in terms of personality. You know, their private lives are very closely guarded, and yet Chris Martin is in Heat magazine with his Hollywood fiancée. And I think that's the same with the other three. They don't do many interviews, and they do interviews, Chris Martin takes the lead. And I think they're very happy doing that. You know, otherwise there would be more internal friction than there is. I think in terms of driving the music, Johnny Buckland is clearly a central role, and I think his personality likes to just keep pushing and experimenting. And like I said before, Will and Guy, I think, are more happy to sort of provide a really solid foundation, which is equally important.
In October 2000, the band embarked upon a major 22-day UK tour, supported by the band Low Gold, who remember Coldplay well.
Will is a lovely, lovely man. He rescued me one evening on tour, the very last night of our tour. We played at Shepherd's Bush, and for some reason I kind of run out of money, had a bad night with a girlfriend, had a little bit too much to drink, got stuck, missed the last tube, and I kind of wandered back to the venue, having left the venue, and everyone was kind of leaving, and there was Will, and he's just a lovely man. He just said, "Come home with me tonight," and he took me home to his house in Kennington, and he made me tea, and we sat down, and he put me up for the evening. He was a very, very nice man. I'll always thank him for that. And but he's a cracking drummer, a really solid drummer, a real kind of bear of a drummer.
I personally have a certain affinity with Johnny just because he's a guitarist and so am I. And I think that he's very kind of he's very astute with like the stuff that he uses to get his sounds. He uses kind of a lot of like delay effects and things like that, and he's a very kind of technical guitarist. And he's not the kind of guitarist that's going to rip into some kind of Malmsteen-esque solo at any point, but his kind of talent lies in using what he's got to kind of eke out the emotion of the songs.
Guy just, like I said, he just really adds with his bass lines to the songs. I mean, that's a technical kind of way of looking at him, but as a person, he's probably the most fun-loving and decadent of the four in my brief experience of him, and he'll kind of be last to bed and last up in the morning.
Coldplay's work schedule showed no signs of relenting, as in June 2000, the guys embarked upon their first headline tour, kicking off at the Cockpit in Leeds.
They actually played on the stage, as you can see behind me. There was just under 300 people in for the gig. Whilst they were playing, they were getting massive sort of applause, and I think they had about 2 encores afterwards as well. Sort of everyone screaming for them to come back on. So yeah, it was a rapturous response.
During the same tour in 2000, Coldplay always made a point of promoting their support acts.
Yeah, Coldplay are always very nice to their support band. They seem to pick bands they really like to help them gain exposure to, audiences across Europe or in America. So they've toured with Idlewild, and they toured with a band called Low Gold in 2000. Chris loved Low Gold so much that he actually sort of sound-checked for them, sang some of their songs, and also played cricket with them, in between sound checks and the gigs, because Chris is a big cricket fan and quite a mean bowler.
Touring was just, it was such a, like I said already, it's like a really early point, and every show was sold out, and everywhere we went, they were just getting mobbed and stuff, and we just kind of were in a slipstream.
And the venues were like anything from like 900 to like 4,000 capacity, which was so massive compared to what we've been playing. And they were all sold out, like every single one. So we got to play to like 50,000 people in
a month.
10 dates or 20 dates, whatever it was, which was brilliant.
What's interesting at Coldplay Live is their ability. They're just 4 guys on stage. They're not massively animated. Chris Martin is coming out a bit more sort of lively. They're not hugely animated. They don't have props. They're not wearing spandex and perms. It's kind of like just came from the bar, really. But they do capture your attention. Inevitably, Chris Martin is the one that you end up looking at. But that's the same for most frontmen. I think they're a spectacular band live. It'll be interesting to see where the live show goes from Rush of Blood to the Head Tour, which was starting to evolve a few more dynamics. But will they start to get involved in live footage behind the band? Will they start to have another keyboard player, like a lot of bands do? Will they start to have a jazz section? Like, where's it going to go musically, and how will that work with the live show?
I think they're stronger than ever. I saw them play a small venue in Camden 3 years ago, and I saw them play All Court this year, which is like 18,000 people, and Chris could reach the back of the hall, which is always the big test of an artist, to make the leap to the really big arenas and the stadiums. And very few people have managed it in 2 albums. And U2 took 5 albums to get there. And Coldplay got there in 2.
In June 2000, Coldplay played on the 2nd stage at the Glastonbury Festival and blew away the competition with an intense performance that converted thousands of newcomers to their slow-burning sound, with Yellow becoming the anthem of the festival.
They did a show at Glastonbury quite low on the bill, which was very well received. And then after the actual festival, there's like an off-the-record festival for the Village. And they played that on Michael Levis's request. And that was like one of the hottest tickets of the year. And that led to the following year's Glasto show, which is generally acknowledged as one of the great shows at that festival. And I mean, that's against some fairly stiff competition.
I used to be at school quite near here, and it was always the thing to aspire to, what can I say? I said it on stage, it was the most important thing we'd ever done, really, so.
They're just a quiet four-piece, essentially, and Chris Martin is a brilliant frontman, but you're not talking about 50-foot lemons descending from the heavens, you know, and people dressed as cartoon cowboys and like the whole Depeche Mode thing of 40-foot screens. That's not what you've got with Coldplay. So what interests me is, in the first instance, how they've been able to go to stages like Glastonbury and captivate. And secondly, can they take that on? Can they go to the States? And can they do the arenas? Or has their live show got to develop into something that doesn't really fit with their personalities and their music?
Returning in 2002, Coldplay had grown in stature and won the hearts of many, with critics and audiences alike agreeing that the band were once again the festival's highlight.
If you headline Glastonbury, then you are an enormous band, full stop. So I'm sure there are kind of venues and gigs they've done around the world that have maybe personally been more gratifying for them, but in terms of like an onlooker, if you headline Glastonbury, then you've arrived and you're kind of here to stay.
My brother was there at that Glastonbury Festival, and I was watching it on television, and that was really, that's probably going to become quite famous in Glastonbury history, I think. And you could see he was thoroughly enjoying it, and to have that many people there in those conditions speaks for itself, and it just shows what sort of appetite was there for their music.
At this stage of their career, Coldplay positively oozed self-confidence, maturity and inner strength. Well aware that they hadn't even reached their peak yet, and to see them on stage proved as satisfying for the audience as for the band.
When you first see him, you see him playing the piano, he can come across as a bit of a nutter. Just, you know, all the movements, a bit in the way that David Gray's got his own head movements, Chris has got his own movements, but he just gets so lost in the music. And I think watching someone on stage who is so absorbed in what they're doing and so into it is amazing. And that's what really adds to the amazing atmosphere at their gigs, to be quite honest. But as I say, for someone who's so unassuming in real life, and so quiet and in a way introverted, to see them come alive like that on the stage is just great. He just lives that music, well, he is that music.
Watching Coldplay, just like on that tour we did, every night, every single night was just a really, really emotional, kind of weighty, heavy kind of evening. And I could be absolutely shattered from being on tour or whatever, but I'd always kind of watch the show, and you'd always get buoyed by the crowd who are just completely engaged with the songs, singing their hearts out, and they would lift the band every night, and they'd always perform a really, really emotional kind of like night.
Coldplay's much celebrated videos also helped to push the group into a new wave of exposure and publicity.
The first one that I saw was Yellow, with Chris walking along the beach and singing, and just so powerful in the way that the Verve one was for Bittersweet Symphony, because it was so simple and it doesn't take away from the song. And just to see, I think it's great to see him performing that song, and obviously there were lots of close-ups on the face and the real agony of the song, and it was like, whoa. You know, everyone's now on the Coldplay fan site is always going, which beach was it, Chris? I don't think it really matters. It was just great. He was there, he was performing the song, and it was fantastic. And of course the one that's won all the awards for them, the one that everyone talks about recently from the second album, the Scientist video.
The best Coldplay video, in my opinion, is The Scientist, which is where the whole thing is shot backwards, where he memorised the vocals backwards. And the fact that his girlfriend took her seatbelt off momentarily to take her coat off, something we've all done. And there's this catastrophic consequences with the car crash. And just that sense of the protagonist, i.e. Chris Martin, the boyfriend, in that film. As the video goes on, you can see he's like the insanity and the mental breakdown that he's going to suffer, if you like, from losing his partner. And you can see him from the middle of that, wandering around the forest and, you know, broken up, being sucked backwards in time through to a normal person in a car with his girlfriend on a nice day trip. And I thought that was really heartrending and really sad concept. And when you actually soundtrack that with The Scientist, which in my opinion is comfortably Coldplay's greatest song, I just thought the package was incredible. And at that moment I thought this band could achieve pretty much anything they wanted to do.
Having won a Grammy in the US for Best Alternative Music Album for Parachutes on the 26th of August 2002, their second album, A Rush of Blood to the Head, was released for anticipating fans. Martin's vocals are radiant as ever, and the mighty, transcendent The Scientist is unquestionably the finest thing they've recorded in their career so far. The predicted gargantuan sales would propel the group even further into the big league of rock gods like U2 and Radiohead.
When I first heard A Rush of Blood to the Head, which came out in 2002, I was disappointed again because I felt it was too much the other way. Whereas Parachute's been quite linear and quite an obvious sound, A Rush of Blood was very cluttered. The rhythm section was suddenly very complicated, and that was quite a concern for me, just from my own personal point of view, obviously. And I felt that the choice of the single as the first single in my head was not a good choice, because it was kind of an obvious single and I wanted something a bit more experimental. But again, like OK Computer, once you listen to that album 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, which you have to, you really start to understand that it's a masterpiece. And it's like going from Parachute's album number 1 to album number 5, but in 2 albums. I think the progression is that vast. And I think Rush of Blood to the Head makes Parachutes look like just a kid's effort.
Playing like 500 gigs in the last 2 years or something, however many it is, then it makes you better. It makes you better as a band. It makes you tighter as a band. And I think the record's a product of us being on tour for 2 years and listening to loads of different types of music that we hadn't really been exposed to before. And it's a mixture of things that make it different.
To be honest, I expected it to be similar to the first album because that is what Coldplay do. I think things have changed on the album. I think his attitude has changed. Obviously, you know, he was allegedly in love while writing this album, and he seems to have, you know, in his lyrics, he seems to have given himself a break a little bit on a few more of the songs than he did on Parachutes. But it was similar, but it was the same sort of Coldplay thing. I think The Scientist was the first track that I checked out. And again, I just heard it and thought, wow, this has got such great lyrics, such a great hook. And I didn't expect a radically different album because what else are they going to do? It's written from the perspective of a man who writes from his inner soul and about his life. And I think they delivered a great album. I'm interested to see what they do for the third one. But no, it was great. Really enjoyed it.
The Rush of Blood to the Head album was the sort of album that people were going to buy even if they didn't like it, and that's not like a derogatory statement, just because the previous album was so popular. And I remember listening to it for the first time and sort of not being able to work out if I was disappointed or not. But like the first record, it was just a grower, and you kind of had like, you know, 4 or 5 listens and saying, I get it. And then when The Scientist came out, I personally think that's their best song. I think it's just an amazing song. And it's kind of very kind of ballad based, and it really suits his singing style, and there's a great video, and everyone could relate to the lyrics.
I think lyrically there's now a willingness to tackle sort of bigger issues on something like politics. I think possibly Chris is going to address the issues he's been campaigning about, maybe more in lyrics, without hopefully falling into some of the sort of campaigning or preachy lyrics that you two were accused of at some point, I think, in their career.
So is it the proverbial difficult second album?
No, this is the proverbial best ever record in the world.
Coldplay could conceivably occupy their undeniable niche in British rock for many years to come. And their success has come down to their refreshingly sincere, honest and emotional songs, with no fake rhetoric or pseudo-angst.
They wanted to be big. I mean, there are a lot of people that come in here that sort of like that want to be big. They seem to have that determination about them to sort of like give it their very, very best shot, you know, because often we'll do a recording, you know, you'll walk away with a CD, you won't hear from people again. You know really that they've given it 3 weeks and, you know, it's gone by the by, but they didn't do that, you know, they were always asking questions, always trying to get information about how do we do this, how do we do that, you know, to the point where we were actually sitting down having a chinwag about after a particular dubbing session, overdubbing session. And they were saying, well, like, how do we make it in the music business? You know, how do you do this kind of stuff, you know? And all we could really tell them at the time was sort of like, well, just keep on doing what you're doing.
At the time, particularly in London, garage was huge, the urban scene was huge, and it was so nice to hear guitars again, and guitars used in such an intelligent way, and to have somebody really writing from the bottom of their heart, which is what Chris Martin does. And I think the fact that they're not an overstyled band, they're a relatively normal band with 4 guys that you wouldn't, if you bumped into them in the street, you wouldn't imagine they're in a band to save their lives. And they just came up with these great songs. And I think the writing and the songs and the depth of feeling is what this band's about. And at the time, that's what the music industry was really lacking. Now we have this huge rock revival in this country. Rock is back, indie is king again, and everyone said it was dead. And I think Coldplay have a huge part to play in that resurgence. And thank God, because it's nice to hear proper songs on the radio.
Coldplay have always been there, the 4 of them. They don't shy away from, you know, doing, in the beginning, radio session, in-store appearances, meeting, greeting disc jockeys, fans, being very gracious to everyone and sort of representing Britain in a very positive manner. In the same way the Beatles used to do it, or, you know, in a different way Pink Floyd have also done it. And I think you might have to do with the sort of middle-class upbringing of, you know, most of the members. They're certainly well-balanced people, and, you know, they're quite driven, and they want to take their music around the world.
I think the American success is that it's a very kind of media society, and I think that they're absolutely delighted that Chris is kind of associated in such a glamorous Hollywood style, and I think that's really helped them in the States personally. But at the end of the day, people have to like listening to the music, and everybody seems to like it.
Chris Martin is not massively comfortable with being a rock icon, which he's turning into. And yet he fell for a Hollywood actress. And I find that fascinating. It's almost like you would have expected him to like delete her phone number because I can't go there. You know, I really like this lady, but I can't get involved, because it's everything that he's trying to avoid. But clearly they're very close, and he couldn't help himself, and they got on really well. She was at the concerts very early on, and I found that whole love story really within Coldplay was just a complete contradiction of what you'd expect. The 2002 Grammy for Best Alternative Rock Act is without a doubt their biggest critical acclaim. They've had heavy coverage in Rolling Stone, which carries a lot of weight within the US record industry. That's what US record store buyers and radio programmers look to. That's like one of the big magazines for them to look to. And because they've been championed by that magazine, that's helped. But undoubtedly a Grammy takes one to a completely different level altogether. The reason they've sold so many records is they've captured what I call the wallpaper crowd, which is people who buy 3 CDs a year. They buy Craig David, Simply Red and Coldplay. They don't know anything about the band except that one of them goes out with a film star they think they've seen in OK magazine, but they love to stick it in the car and drive their 40 miles to work or whatever. And that's a huge market. That's why Simply Red sell a lot of albums and people like the Beautiful South. But where Coldplay have really struck gold in this country is they also have obsessives within the NME 18 to 30 crowd who will get down the front of their show, who will buy the T-shirt, you know, buy the book, buy everything about them. And that's quite an unusual mixture, really. And it does sell books, it sells T-shirts, and I find that quite a strange facet to the band in the sense that they're not overtly rock and rollers. They're quite happy to say we don't go out and get bladdered after shows and do things we shouldn't do in trash hotel rooms, but they still seem to be able to attract quite a committed fan base.
Chris Martin is a gifted songwriter and seems to have the knack of stumbling upon subtle, hook-laden choruses that give each song colour and atmosphere. Martin's voice is lovelorn, assured and agile.
I think I would put them in the top 5 of UK bands of the last 10 years, alongside Radiohead, alongside The Prodigy, Oasis. You know, that's the sort of level they're at, and I think they are beyond, by a country mile, beyond bands like Travis, because they've got the global appeal. You know, so many times you read about bands cracking America in the music press, and actually when you read it, they've gone in at number 85. Well, that's not cracking America. Top 5 Billboard is cracking America, and stadium shows is cracking America. Coldplay have already done that. What Coldplay need to do is make sure that next album, the 3rd album, is also a top Billboard album.
Been rumours that Chris Martin just said, right, I don't want this pressure of this 3rd album, and we're going to take a year, 2 years off and come back with something. And to be honest with you, I'd quite like to see him do that. I'd quite like to see how he deals with this relationship with the Hollywood A-lister. Are they going to get married? Are they not going to get married? Because if he does get married, it's going to change his outlook on things. He's no longer going to be the guy who can't pull. I mean, he's the guy who can't pull in these first 2 albums, and he's going out with Gwyneth Paltrow. So obviously the lyrics for the next album are going to be different. But I think, as he rightly said and has in interviews, they've got to a stage where there's so many expectations. Everyone is second guessing what they're going to do next. And to be honest, they don't need the money anymore. They can go away, kind of redefine the band, see what they stand for now, and come back with something amazing. I mean, normally it's the 2nd album that's supposed to be the difficult 2nd album. This is going to be the difficult 3rd album, because these 2 have just gone so stellar, and I think that would be the best thing to do. Go hide away in America, or go hide away in Iceland or something, and come back and really surprise us.
They said to me when I was kind of hanging out with them and stuff that it was always only ever going to be 2 albums, and then that was the end of the band. And this was like a couple of years ago, so I've no idea how they feel about that nowadays. But I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of like called it a day after this record. But you know.
I think that they there's a fair chance that they will have to have a really good sit down and a discussion about how they feel as a band. Purely because it's...
Well, they've achieved so much for those first 2 records, it's kind of like they've got to do something else.
And I know they don't seem like the kind of people that are going to want to do a damn squib of a record. I think they're going to want to either do something absolutely stunning, or they might not do it.
So you see a direction change or nothing for a while, or something like that?
Because let's face it, they're not short of a few bob, so I think they'll probably survive.
I was pleased with Rush Your Blood to the Head to see the amount of experimentation, and there was a degree of the epic in that album that was missing on the first album. And if they can take that on from there, then I think the world is their oyster.
Brazenly tuneful, their swirl of delicate, powerful melodies, stately piano motifs and show-stopping anthems could hardly have been more at odds with the late 1990s. Yet they have tapped into something and cast themselves as the new face of popular music.
Talking